This is going to be the second video talking about finding all 6 trigonometric functions of any angle, specifically given conditions. So we already worked with this one. It took a long time. I'm going to skip this one because it already tells us the quadrant. I'm going to go ahead and draw the triangle, though, because it is in quadrant 2. I'm going to let you determine and make sure that you draw this triangle. If you want to check your work there, that's fine. Then you can find sine, cosine, tangent, secant, cosecant, and cotangent from there. But I do want to talk about this one just to go through a second problem in case we needed a little extra help on this. And so I redrew, the positive, negative, positive, all that from our coordinate plane here, and also that sine is y, cosine is x. And let's see if we can actually, here we're only asking sine and secant. So let's see if we can find those two. I'm going to go ahead and draw a coordinate plane. And let's start with tangent being -5/4. So again, we need to remember that tangent of an angle theta, that's going to be sine over cosine. So essentially, using this first piece of information, we need to make sure that sine divided by cosine is going to be negative. So if we look here, sine is the y, cosine is the x. If I'm in the quadrant 1, that's a positive divided by a positive. That's always going to be positive. We need it to be negative. So quadrant 1 will not work. Let's go on to quadrant 2. Sine is positive in quadrant 2. Cosine is going to be negative in quadrant 2. So we have a positive divided by a negative. That's going to be a negative, which is good. That's exactly what we want. We want a negative value. So it could be here. If we're in quadrant 3, then we have a negative divided by another negative. A negative divided by a negative would always would produce a positive value, which is not what we want. So I'm going to put an X there. And here in the fourth quadrant, we would have a negative divided by a positive, and a negative divided by a positive is a negative, which is what we want. We want a negative value, so it could be here as well. So that's just considering this first piece of information. The tangent equals -5/4. From here, we could determine whether it's going to be in quadrant 2 or 4 based off of cosine being positive. That's what this is saying. This is telling us that cosine is going to be positive. Well, let's look. Cosine is the x value in terms of our coordinate pair. If we look in quadrant 2, the x value will always be negative. That is not going to make sure that cosine is positive, obviously, so it can't be in quadrant 2. So hopefully the idea is that it is in quadrant 4. Let's just double check. Cosine greater than 0, cosine's our x value. In quadrant 4, all of our cosine values will be positive. So it does work. We are in quadrant 4. So we draw a line extending out into quadrant 4. To create our triangle, the dotted line always goes straight to our x-axis. And our reference angle is going to be here, it's closest to the origin. Now, we can use the ratio -5/4 because tangent is also, it is sine over cosine. We showed this, but it's also opposite over adjacent. And I shouldn't put the negative on the 5. I should have put it in front of the fraction. That's just habit. But if it's opposite over adjacent, and this is the angle that we're considering, then the opposite side would be here, which means the opposite side would be 5. Opposite over adjacent, and the adjacent would be 4. And in order for that to be negative, then one of these values has to be negative. The 4 positive, because if I'm moving to the right, that means the 4 would be positive. But because we're moving down, the 5 would be negative. And we can solve for the hypotenuse. If you need to rewind to catch something, please do so. We can solve for the hypotenuse by doing the Pythagorean theorem. I'm moving through this a little quickly. So if you take the square root of both sides, that's going to give us a positive or a negative value. In this case, so we need to choose which one is it going to be, positive or negative. In this case, because we're solving for the hypotenuse, that's going to be a positive value. So this becomes positive square root of 41. A lot's happening here. It's a very rich problem, very little information. You have a tangent and a cosine. That's all we have. But we can determine the, what's going on in the triangle, the quadrant, and from here find all of the other 6 trig functions. I'm going to do that quickly. I'm also going to give you the rationalized version. I recommend you finding sine, cosine, tangent, all of those on your own, but I'm going to give you the rationalized versions so that you can check your work. -5/4. Sine is related to cosecant, so that would be the reciprocal. So that would be this is secant theta and cotangent of theta. So those are our 6 trig functions. And particularly, we were looking at for sine and secant. Lots happening here. The more practice you get, the better you'll get at it. So I recommend, there's a problem here. There's one also if you print it off the page on the back of the first page or the second page, and then further problems into the review. If you have questions at all on any of these problems, please feel free to ask me at any time. I'd be happy to help you out to help understand what's going on.